This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
To get a transcript of today's show, plus all future transcripts emailed to you, go to offthechainshow.com.
Prepare yourself for the uncensored, nothing held back, no BS reality of how business and life really work. Doberman Dan is off the chain.
Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte. Yeah, he said bone. This is further proof that the reason that amuses me is further proof that guys never mentally mature past the age of 14. The Napoleon Bonaparte. I mean, that's how we said it when I was 14. And here I am now at 51. And it still amuses me, Jonathan. I refuse to grow up.
He said bone.
That has nothing to do with nothing either. I mean, I just said Napoleon Bonaparte because it amuses me. We're not talking about that at all today.
Really?
Actually, we are. I lied. But I still, so I'm looking at my notes. Yes, I do make notes. I really do. I really prepare for these shows. It's just that when we get started, what happens to the notes usually is like, and I'm off to the races. No, so I was just looking at my notes when we started, and I was reminded of junior high and Napoleon Bonaparte. Hey, he said bone. But yeah, so actually we're kind of talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. Let's title this, Jonathan. Let's call it Napoleon Bonaparte and your money. How's that?
Sounds good.
But he's only a small part of it. Actually, it's more about France. More specifically, France in 1790. A brief story / history lesson. In 1790, the French government, as I like to say, spelled Gummit, the French government was running a little short on cash. And so they wanted to find a new way to finance all the spending that they were going to do, whatever that was. I didn't research it deep enough to find out what they wanted to spend money on. I don't know, more croissants and café au lait and all that other Frenchy stuff, I guess. So, but they were running short on cash, the government. And so the politicians at the time hit upon this incredibly novel and bold new plan to pay for everything they were buying or wanted to buy. Here was their plan, Jonathan. They started printing money.
Oh.
And thought they were geniuses. Like, I mean, first of all, the plan was popular. It let the French government pay its debts and buy all kinds of new stuff and engage in all kinds of new government stuff without burdening the people with higher taxes. Because one of the things they were freaking out about, because they thought, let's just raise taxes. And I thought, no, we could have a tax rebellion. Let's just print money. So this was a paper money, and it was called the assignat. ASSIGNAT. Look it up on Google. I am not making this up. And it was first issued. The French people accepted it. I mean, after all, it's the government, aren't they? Always looking out for your best interests and looking to help out the little peeps. So this is where it got interesting. So there were subsequent new waves of assignats printed and injected into the economy. And every time they did that, the assignat fell. So in other words, prices rose to compensate for the assignat's fall in value because the people started realizing, hey, they're just printing more of this. So I guess that would be the definition of inflation. People think, oh, it's rising prices. No, it's not. It's the value in the money becoming less and less because there's more and more of it. So, business people ain't stupid. when the money is worth less and less, then you got to charge more and more for the same goods and services. It's the same example as baseball cards. Were you a baseball fan, Jonathan?
I was more into Garbage Pail Kids.
All right, I'm going to improvise and go with that example. Garbage Pail Kids. So I vaguely remember those cards. Which was the most popular card or the most popular character?
You put me on the spot. I don't even remember.
Okay, Pizza Face Pete. Let's say Pizza Face Pete was one of the most popular cards. So let's say the Garbage Pail Kids LLC in Walla Walla, Washington, just decides, you know what? We are going to make 5 Pizza Face Pete cards. No more. We swear to God, hand on the Bible, cross my heart, hope to die. No more than 5. All of a sudden, Pizza Face Pete, kids are buying, these Garbage Pail Kids cards, just looking for Pizza Face Pete, praying, hoping they find a Pizza Face Pete card because they're so valuable, because it's a limited edition. So these lucky 5 people get a Pizza Face Pete card and they're just set for life. They think, I'm just going to hold on to this thing forever. When I'm retired, I'll cash it in for $40 bazillion because there's only 5 of these things. And then the Garbage Pail Kids company says, you know what? We lied. And as of today, we're going to be printing like 5 million Pizza Face Pete cards a week. And hell, you know what? We're just going to do 5 million a day. We're just going to go up in helicopters and drop them on cities throughout the country, so everybody can have a Pizza Face Pete card. Well, kids ain't stupid. They know, okay, Pizza Face Pete isn't worth jack anymore. I mean, the only value it has is for, kindling for a fire. So same with the French assignat. And so that is stage 1 of inflation, by the way. In the first stage, prices don't rise as fast as the money supply does because people don't know what's happening yet. Yeah, some people figure it out. They delay their spending, with the hope that prices are going to fall back, go back to normal. But in effect, they just take some of the money out of circulation as the government's pumping it back in. They take it out of circulation by not spending it. So this was France in 1790. In the second stage, a lot more people catch on and they're spending their money quickly, man. Prices rise faster than the money supply because each unit of money, or the assignat in this example, is changing hands faster and faster. And people just want to get rid of it quickly, and they're willing to accept less for it because they know if they sit on it any longer, even if it's just a few days, a few weeks, it's going to keep losing its value. Then we hit the third stage. So that's the runaway inflation. Everybody's on the ruse, man, at that point. And they are in a panic to get rid of this money as soon as they get their hands on it because it declines that fast. The value of the money declines that fast, which at that point, it's basically scrap paper. So if they get paid in the morning, they're immediately going to the grocery store to buy what little they can buy, because if they wait till the afternoon until they get off work, that money might have lost 90% of its value. That stage, by the way, is where Venezuela is right now, and probably actually worse. But from the second stage to the third stage can happen fast, literally a matter of a few weeks. So in 1790 France, the first stage of the assignat inflation, that didn't last long. It quickly gave way to the second stage because people started wising up to what was happening. And so they wouldn't save the money. They just needed to spend it as fast as they could. Every time a person received an assignat, they'd rush out and spend it before its value could fall any further. And therefore, demand for it weakened and the velocity, as I call it, increased, which is, the movement of the money. So important note, important segment in our story, the merchants who accepted signets, they knew the value of the money was falling, and they needed some way to protect themselves against the risks they were taking by accepting it. So some just decided, forget it, I'm not going to take the risk. And they only started dealing in gold and silver, which they knew the government, couldn't screw that up. They can't create gold and silver on a printing press. So they're just like, forget it. No assignats here, monsieur. Just gold and silver. Others who kept taking the paper did a little different. They basically added an extra profit on to cover the probable or the possible fluctuation in value. And if they thought, okay, it's 8 o'clock now, 8 a.m. By 4 p.m., this is going to lose 90% of its value. So, what was normally 100 assignats, now, I'm going to charge 350 assignats for to cover that. So anyway, this is like a dog chasing its tail, man. The worse it is, the worse it gets. And by 1793, for example, an item that cost 25 assignats in 1790, by 1793, had risen to 1,000 assignats. Now get this, only 6 months later, it had risen to 7,000.
Holy crap.
This is where Venezuela is right now. It's just a mess. So, everybody tried to invest this paper in buildings, machines, real stuff. The stuff that under most circumstances retains some sort of intrinsic value, gold, silver, real estate, stuff like that. So when the politicos saw that this stage 3 inflation was developing lickety split, they started getting desperate. So to stop the decline in demand for the assignat, they started enacting wage and price controls. And so basically what is, they forbade anyone to sell goods or services above certain stated prices. They set prices, what they did. They also wouldn't let anybody trade in gold, silver, or foreign currencies or any of that stuff. And they made laws, making really high penalties for those who failed to obey. So guess what happens as a result of this? Or as a result of the government's solution.
The government?
In quotes. The government solution. And you can't see me. I'm doing those finger quotes when I say solutions. I just want you to get the mental picture. So a black market develops. People begin spending their assignats on the black market to try to get rid of them as fast as possible. And so the politicians decided the solution to this problem was to put more teeth in the law. They're going to increase fines, which had no effect whatsoever. So they're like, okay, well, that didn't work. So let's do it again. Let's make the fines even steeper. Anybody caught trading with gold or silver or foreign currencies, they're going to get 6 years in prison. And a second offense, 20 years in prison. But still, the black market is just booming. It flourishes. And demand for the assignat keeps falling. Prices keep rising. It was just insane. Soap sellers in Paris, they added so much addition to their prices, so much cushion to protect against how fast the assignat was declining in value that the women who washed the clothes, they could no longer afford to purchase soap. So they're freaking out because they're going to lose their ability to earn a living. So mobs of these angry clothes washing women, whatever you call them, they demand, of course, they go to the government seeking a solution. They demand anybody selling soap at high prices should be punished with death. Yeah, seriously, death. This is, now we're getting into mob mentality. This is what a runaway inflation can do to normally relatively reasonable, insane people. It turns them into a mob willing to kill people over soap for the love of God. And that's exactly what happened. February 28, 1793, riots all throughout Paris. Mobs of people going from store to store, stealing bread from bakeries. They couldn't buy it. I mean, it was too expensive at that point. Nobody could buy anything. So what else could they do? Stealing all the staples, rice, sugar, flour, anything they could carry. So obviously the politicians getting more and more desperate to stop this problem. May 1793, they took the final step and they declared the death penalty for anybody convicted of even having asked before any kind of business deal was made in what form and what monetary payment will be made. Just asking that, you got the freaking death penalty. And so to keep all these desperate people in the country from fleeing this chaos, they also, it just makes sense when that currency is going to hell, get out of it and get into another currency. But they also declared the death penalty for any French person caught investing in a foreign currency. So these measures worked. They worked for a while. They kind of cooled things down. And stage 3 went back to stage 2. But it was like a temporary fix because by 1795, inflation was back into stage 3. And in spite of all this stuff that the politicians were doing, the price controls, all that stuff, death penalty crap and all that, flour that back in 1790 cost 2 assignats was now at 225.
Wow.
So obviously people who were deep in debt were just ecstatic, man. They just thought this was a gift from God. I mean, imagine if you had borrowed 10,000 assignats in 1790, you could repay the debt with the equivalent of 35 assignats. So I guess somebody benefited from that. So here's the solution the politicians come up with. They decide, okay, that didn't work. Let's scrap the assignat, but let's replace it with a new one. Let's call it the mandat, M-A-N-D-A-T, mandat. I don't know how to pronounce stuff in French, but as if, it didn't work the first time. Maybe it will work the second time. This was even a worse catastrophe than the assignat. So the French people, they learned their lesson about paper money because almost as soon as the mandate was released, it starts losing value right off the presses, hot off the presses, boom. Whatever face value was, all of a sudden people are accepting it at 35% off the face value. And it just kept getting worse and worse. Nothing worked. This problem just flew out of control. And by May 1797, the demand for paper money had sunk to nothing. Or as I like to say, nuttin', honey. Love my 80s TV commercial references. It was completely worthless. So in 1799, there was a coup d'etat. The government was overthrown. And here's where my intro comes in. They replaced the government with this ruthless dictator, a man of action. And he vowed that as long as he lived, he would never again let the French government at least, issue paper money. And that dude's name was Napoleon Bonaparte. And, we know what happened after that. Life was exactly rosy after that. That dude in his lust for increased political power, or just power in general, I guess. He threw Europe into one of the worst orgies of bloodshed ever known. So this French example, I got a couple takeaways from this because I don't want to just scare people and then say, and good night. I want to leave things on a positive note. Here's a quote from Thomas Jefferson in 1817. He says, "The paper money has some advantages, is admitted, but that its abuses are also inevitable. And by breaking up the measure of value, makes a lottery of all private property cannot be denied. Shall we ever be able to put a constitutional veto on it? Obviously not, because here we are in 2016, and I'm not quite sure what stage we're in, but we're in one of the stages, which it never gets better. It only gets worse. Now, listen, take a hammer and knock a hole in a dinghy, and it's going down, okay? But the Titanic, we're in the Titanic. Take a hammer and knock a hammer-sized hole in the Titanic, and it's going to keep sailing for decades before that thing ever goes down. But knock a hole in the Titanic, or keep knocking the hole until it's the size of Ohio. I was going to say Texas, but I feel like saying Ohio to honor my birthplace. So when the Titanic has the hole the size of Ohio, it's going down. It's inevitable. So here's my takeaway. Keep an eye on this. Don't let fear run your life and don't freak out over this. I don't think it's time yet to go buy a 50 caliber machine gun in an underground bunker, although that's where I currently live. But I'm not saying you should do that. But I think we as entrepreneurs should probably start keeping an eye on some of the new currencies like Bitcoin. In fact, I was just looking at this cool little device today called the Trezor, Trezor. You should check that out. It's a little Bitcoin wallet, but it's an actual physical wallet. And it's basically President Obama. Here's what he said about this. He said it's like having a Swiss bank in your pocket. Now, of course, he wasn't saying that as a good thing. All the entrepreneurs are like, well, hell yeah, that's what I want. Obama was saying it because it's exactly, contrarian to what the government wants. They don't want you to have any privacy in your financial affairs, even though they do. The Fed has never been audited. But as entrepreneurs, I think we should keep an eye on Bitcoin and maybe gold money. And I'm wondering, I'm going to predict the future. I'm wondering if we're going to see some sort of new credit card processing system that works instead of on some sort of government forced currency like the dollar or whatever, that it works on gold and silver. So, gold money issues a credit card and you have X amount of credit on that card, but it's denominated in gold and silver. I have no idea. I'm not an expert in these matters, but I'm just saying we should keep an eye on this because, it may sound like this leads to the end of the world, but it really doesn't. What it just leads to is change. And it lets the majority see the folly and the ineffectiveness of a small group of non-governmental organizations and bankers control the money supply, control the currency. When if it's just free market, like some of these, like Bitcoin and that, you're in control of it. And entrepreneurs will always adapt to that. Whatever new system comes out, if they replace the dollar with the assignat, entrepreneurs will adapt. So I'm not saying this to be an alarmist. I'm just saying this to keep an eye on these things and start figuring out, how you would adapt when these changes start to happen.
Wow. That was very interesting. So what do you have coming up for us next time, Dan?
The title of the next podcast is You're the Apple of My Eye.
All right. I'm looking forward to it. So that is a wrap for another awesome show with Doberman Dan. Thank you guys for tuning in, the Canine crew, and thank you, Dan, for sharing that story with us. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, to get a transcript of today's show emailed to you, go to offthechainshow.com.
This is the podcastfactory.com.